An American missionary came to Lagos and settled, opening a church. Initially, it felt like his ministry was stuck at the same level and he kept believing in God for a change. As the weeks passed, his attention was drawn to one of his female members, Linda, a woman who had been attending for a while and had become quite close to him. They began to date, and as their relationship blossomed, the church began to expand. He began to notice something strange happening in his ministry. The congregation, which had been modest in size, started growing rapidly, seemingly overnight. New members arrived in droves, filling the seats of the church. The American missionary, puzzled by this sudden boom, wondered why it was happening. He had always believed in the power of prayer and divine favor, but this surge was mysterious. The missionary was both delighted and confused by the dramatic increase in attendance, so he casually brought it up as a discussion between him and his fiancée, Linda, who answered him casually too and quickly dismissed the topic. This continued for a while, and out of curiosity, he decided to inquire from God. He casually made a prayer to God, at first, as thanksgiving for the growth he is seeing in his ministry, and later, the night of that day, he slept and had a vision of where he went to buy something and was given a receipt. At the top of the receipt, where the logo of a brand is placed, was drawn a mermaid as the logo. He woke up, confused. Because the dream did not make any sense to him, he shoved it. But because God is merciful and works in mysterious ways, he kept drawing his mind to that dream. He'd be busy with the day's work, and suddenly that dream will replay in his mind. He did not need to deliberately remember it, it just happens. It continued until he decided to give it his attention. He asked God to help him understand or give him signs. Days later, he noticed strange movements from Linda. He finally decided to confront her, curious to understand the source of the church's unexpected success. After much persuasion, she finally opened up to him. In a quiet, almost hesitant voice, she confessed that she was a servant of a mermaid, an ancient and mysterious spirit from the depths of the ocean. This mermaid had bestowed upon her an unusual power, a cobra that she was to worship. The moment she worshipped the cobra, making incantations and invoking the spirit behind it, members would join their church in droves. The American missionary was shocked and skeptical, unable to fathom how such a thing could be true. But the woman explained that this was the source of their church's newfound success. Spiritual power given by the mermaid. Her words struck him like a thunderbolt, and in the silence that followed, he realized the depth of the deception he had unknowingly become part of, and because he genuinely wants to serve God, he flew back to his country, especially after he started seeing a mermaid in his dream asking him to bow down and worship her. He left the church for Linda, who announced to the congregants that Pastor Larry Will, the American missionary, traveled temporarily. One stormy Sunday morning, a desperate crowd filled the massive hall of Holy Ground Ministries. Whispers swirled through the room as they craned their necks to catch sight of prophetess Linda, popularly known as Mama Lee. Some said she could pierce through a person's soul, revealing secrets no one could ever know. Others swore she had the power to speak directly with God. But today, something unsettling hung in the air. Just then, a scream echoed from the side of the hall. A lady named Agatha, one of Mama Lee's trusted aides, rushed to the front, wide-eyed and shaking. She did it again. Agatha shouted. Mama Lee had healed another person. The congregation erupted in cheers, but Elizabeth, a quiet church member who had been attending for months, noticed something strange. She had seen this very crippled man walking around the market just days before. Doubt clawed at her heart, but who would believe her? Mama Lee was powerful and untouchable. Her followers would fight to protect her. Years ago, Linda had been a simple girl from a humble, God-fearing family. Her parents raised her to be honest, devoted, and to walk in the light. She was the shining hope of their church, leading Sunday school, organizing prayer meetings, and singing in the choir. Everyone adored her, and some even said she was destined for greatness. But somehow, her path took a dark turn. Years later, after struggling to build her ministry, Linda attended a grand conference for pastors. There, she met several famous preachers who seemed to hold a secret power. The leader, Pastor Benji, pulled her aside. You are trying to be godly, but you will never make an impact until you are willing to sacrifice, he told her. He talked about a special ceremony that would require a significant offering from her. At first, Linda hesitated, but Pastor Benji promised her it would grant her the influence she desperately sought. Driven by her desire to succeed, she agreed. This is how her encounter with the mermaid actually started. That night, Linda participated in a strange ritual, giving up her chance to ever have children as an offering. The pastors gathered around, chanting while Linda's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and anticipation. When it was over, she felt an air of power settle around her like a dark cloak. Something had changed. Because her guilty conscience was pricking her, she did not continue with the rituals and her ministry packed up. Out of that frustration, she joined Pastor Larry's church and gradually went back to those rituals and practices. This time around she accepted it with her full chest, especially after seeing how her congregants dispersed. She held on to Pastor Larry's ministry and started building it under the guise that he traveled temporarily. The congregants does not know that he left for good. Linda attended that conference again. This time around, it was her choice. After returning from the conference, her fortunes began to shift. People started flocking to her services, and soon the entire country had heard of Mama Lee. Her church began filling up with members from every corner of Nigeria and beyond. Her fame grew, and with it, her wealth. But this was only the beginning. Unknown to her followers, Prophetess Linda was far more than just a deceitful prophetess. Beneath her human exterior lay an ancient, sinister secret. Linda became a half-human, half-serpent, a hybrid of darkness whose origin traced back to a mysterious underwater covenant. She had entered this occult world after joining the cult. Every midnight, she would disappear from her luxurious mansion, leaving the world of mortals behind. In the dead of night, she would shed her human form and transform into a creature as dark as midnight. This transformation marked her journey to the underwater kingdom, where her true allegiance lay. There, she would join other pastors and prophets who had pledged themselves to the marine kingdom. Together, they shared twisted wisdom, dark strategies, and skills to keep their congregations bound in deception. For Linda, this was where she drew her power. The Marine Queen, a towering figure with serpentine features, bestowed upon her strength, vision, and the ability to see into the lives of her followers. But there was a price for this power: her soul, her humanity, and perhaps most disturbingly, her womb. Linda had sacrificed her ability to bear children to gain authority and influence in the physical world. Back in her church, no one suspected a thing. To them, Linda was a holy prophetess, and they were oblivious to her midnight disappearances. Her congregation continued to grow as people flocked from far and wide, desperate for miracles, healing, and deliverance. Those who sought her favor were willing to pay any price, from cash offerings to livestock and even precious family heirlooms. Linda's ministry had become a relentless machine, swallowing people's wealth and hopes alike. Within months, she began implementing strange new practices. Each member was handed a mirror, which she called the mirror of life. She would say, with a commanding tone, that it was blessed by the Almighty Himself. Every morning, look into it, speak to it, and you will see part of your spirit that needs healing. Her congregants cherished these mirrors, believing they were on a path to spiritual growth. But in reality, the mirrors were tools connected to the marine world. Through them, she could peer into her members' lives, studying their weaknesses, secrets, and fears. One Sunday, Mama Lee called a young woman named Kay to the front. "Last night, you argued with your husband about his job, didn't you?" she said, a sly smile crossing her lips. Kay gasped. "How did you know?" The congregation erupted into a frenzy, marveling at Mama Lee's ability to know every detail of their lives. In truth, she had used her mirror to summon Kay's spirit in the night before, gathering all she needed to make the revelation sound divine. The church soon introduced holy water and miracle oil, bottled with simple labels but sold at exorbitant prices. Patricia would wave her hands over the items, claiming they could cure any sickness, fix any marriage, and even bring financial blessings. When Elizabeth saw a struggling mother give her last savings for a tiny bottle of miracle oil, she clenched her fists, feeling her suspicions deepen. The next Sunday, Prophetess Linda's voice echoed through the church as she scanned the congregation with piercing eyes. Her gaze landed on a young man seated in the middle row. His name was Abra, a recent graduate who had just returned from overseas with his mother to visit Linda's church. Having heard of her church and her supposed divine revelations, they thought it wise to seek a blessing. Linda's face lit up. "Young man, please come forward." Abra hesitated, but his mother nudged him, whispering, "Go. This could be your blessing." As Abra stepped up to the front, Linda raised her hand in what looked like a gesture of divine revelation. She took a deep breath and then announced dramatically, "The Lord has revealed something troubling to me. My son." The congregation fell silent, hanging on every word. Linda looked at Abra with a heavy gaze, shaking her head slowly. "Young man, your life battery is running dangerously low. I see darkness ahead. If nothing is done, you won't live to see your 30s. Marriage, children, all of that will be lost to you unless you act now." Abra's heart began to pound. "Life battery? What does that mean?" Linda placed a comforting hand on his shoulder and lowered her voice. "It means, my son, that if something isn't done quickly, you won't live to see your 30s. Marriage, children, everything you desire will slip away." Abra's face turned pale, and his mother gasped in fear. But Linda continued, raising her hand as if bestowing hope upon him. "The Lord has provided a solution. There is a way to renew your life battery, to ensure you live a long and prosperous life." She leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing with intensity. "You must make a sacrifice, a powerful seed. Something that costs you deeply. For the Lord blesses those who give from the heart." Abra's mother urged him, "Abra, don't delay. Just do what Mama Lee says. Your life is worth more than any amount of money." Reluctantly, Abra agreed, pulling out his checkbook and writing a large sum. Linda accepted the check with a smile of satisfaction. "Your obedience has pleased the Lord. Your life is now in God's hands, and He will reward you." But Linda had no intention of buying any cow or offering any sacrifice. As she did with many others, she took the money straight to her ongoing project fund, adding it to the luxurious mansion she was constructing on the outskirts of town. Then, one service, Elizabeth noticed something she couldn't ignore. An elderly man in a wheelchair rolled up to the altar. Mama Lee placed her hand on his forehead, murmuring a prayer. The man suddenly stood up, shaking with supposed new strength. The congregation erupted in joyous shouts, but Elizabeth recognized him from her street. He wasn't disabled at all. He was an actor, paid to pretend for this miracle. Elizabeth watched from a distance as she gathered most stories like this. She saw the pattern and knew that these prophecies were nothing more than calculated lies to drain her followers financially. She began to find a way to expose her evil doings, though she knew it wouldn't be easy. She prayed that her efforts would one day set people like Abra free, opening their eyes to the truth about Patricia's schemes. Elizabeth's resolve strengthened by her desire to protect innocent lives from falling into the same trap. Despite her growing doubts, Elizabeth kept attending the church, quietly observing. Over time, Linda had become one of the wealthiest women in the area, with a mansion filled with gold-plated furniture, expensive cars, and personal staff. She called it a reward from God, but Elizabeth knew that no blessing had ever arrived for her poor neighbors, who continued to give until they had nothing left. Amid all her schemes, Linda wielded her power not only to deceive but to control lives, even breaking up families for her own selfish desires. She took a particular interest in wealthy, influential men who attended her church, especially those she sensed could be easily manipulated. If she set her sight on a married man, she would concoct visions and divine revelations that cast doubt upon his wife, creating chaos in the household. During one particular scandalous service, Linda singled out a successful businessman named Mr. Oki. She called him to the front of the congregation, dramatically raising her hand as though she was receiving a divine message. "Brother Oki," she declared, "the Lord is showing me a troubling vision. A dark cloud surrounding your household. Someone close to you, someone you trust deeply, is working against your blessings." As expected, Mr. Oki looked alarmed, his eyes widened with shock and fear. "Prophetess, who could it be?" he asked desperately, eager to protect his fortune and his family. Linda leaned in, lowering her voice to a solemn whisper. "It's your wife," she added. "I see her spirit entangled in the web of envy and greed, blocking your breakthroughs. But fear not, Mama Lee is here to help you. With my special guidance, I can break this curse." Over time, Linda convinced Mr. Oki that his wife's supposed negative energy was the reason for his business struggles. She encouraged him to distance himself emotionally, assuring him that deliverance would come if he followed her instructions. What she didn't tell Mr. Oki was her real motive. She intended to draw him closer to her, knowing he was vulnerable. She began sending him private messages, inviting him to special prayer sessions at her mansion under the pretext of clearing his spirit of his wife's supposed bad influence. This session, however, soon took a different turn. Linda manipulated Mr. Oki, feeding him flattering words and assuring him of a life filled with blessings if he would satisfy her desires. In no time, Mr. Oki found himself entangled in an affair with Linda, convinced that his loyalty to her would bring him divine favor. This pattern repeated with other wealthy men in the congregation. Linda sowed seeds of doubt between husbands and wives. Elizabeth, the young woman who had been investigating Linda, grew increasingly disturbed as she learned of these manipulative tactics. This wasn't just a spiritual deception. It was a web of lies that destroyed families and tore relationships apart. Linda's actions were beyond sinful. They were predatory. Another unsettling practice was that Linda claimed she could bless any gallon of water, transforming it into a holy remedy for all problems, illness, financial troubles. For a fee, people would leave their gallons of water in her office for prayers. Behind closed doors, Linda would simply pour a pack of salt and sugar into each gallon, saying, "Now take this water home and drink from it each day." The salt and sugar created a slight change in taste, fooling congregants into believing the water was truly blessed. One evening, Elizabeth overheard a conversation between two of Linda's closest aides, Felix and Laura, discussing about the gallon of water trick. "Can you believe they are paying that much just for a dash of salt and sugar?" Laura laughed, shaking her head. Elizabeth felt a surge of fear but stood her ground, her heart filled with the courage to see her mission through. She knew Linda's days of deception were numbered. The truth was out there, ready to be revealed, and there was no turning back now. Another faithful night, driven by a mixture of curiosity and courage, Elizabeth decided to follow Linda. She waited in the bushes near the river behind Linda's mansion, clutching her phone tightly, hoping to capture whatever dark secret lay hidden. The clock struck midnight, and Elizabeth saw Linda emerge from her mansion. She moved gracefully toward the river, her steps almost gliding across the ground. Elizabeth's heart raced as she watched Linda kneel at the riverbank. The prophetess looked up at the sky and began chanting in a strange language, one that sounded ancient and unsettling. Then, before Elizabeth's very eyes, Linda's form began to change. Her skin shimmered and scales emerged, covering her body. Her legs melded together, her eyes glowing as she slid silently into the water, disappearing beneath the surface with a splash. Elizabeth gasped, barely able to process what she had seen. She realized then that Linda was not just a fraud. She was something beyond human, something malevolent. The next morning, Elizabeth returned to the church, her spirit heavy but resolved. She knew now that her mission was not just to reveal Linda's fraudulent practices but to expose the dangerous forces she was harnessing. Linda, aware of Elizabeth's growing suspicion, took note. Her piercing gaze lingered on Elizabeth during the service, her smile as sharp as a blade. During the altar call that day, Linda announced that she had a special blessing for one person in the congregation who was called to serve a divine mission. She fixed her gaze on Elizabeth, who froze as Linda called her forward. "Elizabeth, come forward." Linda's voice was smooth but laced with an undertone of menace. "The Lord has shown me that you carry a heavy burden. Come, let Mama Lee lift it from you." Elizabeth's heart pounded, but she stepped forward, not wanting to reveal her fear. As Linda laid a cold hand on her forehead, Elizabeth felt a chilling sensation run through her body. She heard Linda whisper in her ear, "You are treading dangerous waters, my child. Be careful, for some secrets are not meant to be uncovered." Elizabeth swallowed hard but refused to back down. She would continue her mission to expose her. She now knew the stakes were higher than she had imagined. There was no turning back now. Elizabeth's courage became her guiding light as she continued to gather evidence against Linda. With every passing day, she uncovered more layers of deception and dark manipulation, which confirmed that Linda's reach went beyond mere miracles. It was now clear to Elizabeth that her mission was about more than just exposing Linda's lies. It was about freeing innocent souls bound by her sinister practices. When Elizabeth finally released her gathered recordings, photos, and testimonies to the media, the world was shocked. Reports spread like wildfire, exposing Linda's deceitful miracles, staged healings, and occult connections. Congregants who had once revered her now cried out in disbelief, feeling betrayed by the person they once called prophetess. Many wept openly, mourning the years and money they had poured into her ministry, only to realize it had all been a carefully orchestrated illusion. In her final address to the church, Elizabeth spoke to the congregation, offering words of wisdom. "My brothers and sisters, this experience has taught me something crucial. Just because someone calls themselves a prophet or a servant of God doesn't mean they are. We must be discerning and vigilant, seeking the truth beyond appearances. Not every church or prayer house represents God's light, and not everyone who claims to be a pastor is genuine." Elizabeth went on to remind everyone that while Linda's story had cast a dark shadow, it didn't mean all spiritual leaders were deceivers. There are true servants of God, men and women who work tirelessly in humility and sincerity to bring God's love and truth to His people. They don't ask for wealth or demand strange sacrifices. They simply live in a way that reflects the goodness and mercy of the Almighty. Thank you for watching till end. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Be safe out there, and I'll see you soon.